My name is Gevin Gam. I'm a coffee roaster in Sydney, Australia. I've been roasting coffee for about 20 years now. And the biggest part of what I do in my business is direct trade. I'm the head coffee buyer. I do quite a bit of travel to Origin to buy coffees. I was one of the first smaller players in the market to be sourcing my own coffee. Most of the guys were saying they were, but they were getting it through brokers. I buy a very minimal amount of my coffee through local brokers, which they don't really like me for that, but that's just how the industry is.
And so you work out of Sydney.
Yes.
There's a lot of competition
A lot of competition.
Australia.
Yes, throughout Australia. But Sydney and Melbourne probably the most competitive, and probably one of the most competitive markets in the world. There's coffee shops and cafes popping up everywhere, in barbers, in hairdressing salons, in bookstores, in wherever people can find. I had a lady approach me the one day. She has a dentist and she's got a window that she wanted me to put a coffee machine in there and start selling espresso. So everybody thinks that there's very good money to be made, and it's easy to open up an espresso business. We are probably one of the most competitive, most advanced coffee businesses, coffee cultures in the world. So the competition is really, really strife. For a country with 22 odd million people, we've got something like 500 coffee roasters, which is great. It's an insane amount of coffee roasters.
So for every 400,000 people, there's at least one coffee roaster.
At least, yes. Yeah.
And so competition. So are consumers drinking coffee with milk typically?
Yes, probably 98%, 95% of the coffees that are being sold are milk-based coffees, and generally bigger coffees. People are now moving towards more smaller coffees. I mean, there's a drink very popular in Australia, which is a piccolo latte, which is basically a small latte, anywhere between 3 or 4 ounce drink. Some people are putting double ristretto shots into their piccolo lattes. So, but also now what's happening is that with the third wave, a lot of the micro roasters are starting to do pour overs and cold drips, and that's also becoming a little bit more prevalent, but not as much as, if you're going to understand that we're an espresso-based coffee culture. And that basically was derived from when the Italians and the Greeks arrived in the 50s and the 60s and brought espresso machines with them. That's how the market has evolved from there.
And so how has your business over the last 20 years since you started
Yes.
evolved? How is it?
Well, it's the biggest involvement, the biggest advancement for me was the fact that we were sourcing our own green coffee and actually traveling to Origin and buying coffees and having a direct impact, rather than having to rely on the coffee that the brokers were bringing in. Then I was sourcing coffee myself. And that's all changed now, because the brokers there's a lot more competition in brokers as well. When I started in the industry 20 years ago, there were 2 major players in green coffee. Now there's probably 20, maybe 25 players in green coffee. So what's happening is it's now forced the brokers, the old school brokers, to evolve and reevaluate what they're doing. So they're now starting to bring in micro lots and specialty coffees, and micro lots and traceable coffees have become more of a buzzword now than before.
And so direct trade, what are some of the pitfalls of direct trade?
Well, some of the pitfalls of direct trade is that you need to know who you're dealing with, and it's a question of establishing trust and a relationship with the people that you're dealing with. And you can be led, in Australia, be led a bum steer, where you've been sent a sample and you've approved the sample and the coffee arrives and it's not as to what the sample was. That's one of them. I mean, the other thing also with direct trade, and what I've been doing is I've been buying full containers of coffee. So to save on freight costs, but you then have to roast through the coffee so that it's keeping it fresh. So it's a question of balancing the blends and the inventory to make sure that you're rotating the coffee properly, as in a freshness in the coffee.
And so how does your business model look like? You have an import business, a roastery, and what? How do you sell the coffee?
We sell the coffee. I have a sales rep on the road. So as you say, we import the green coffee. We have a rep on the road. We also have another full-on customer service guy that goes around and makes sure that all of our customers, machines and their baristas, are producing a really good cup of coffee. And So the business grows primarily because of more of an organic growth, because we're ensuring that everybody's bringing the coffee to the exacting standards that we require.
And so is the business model very reliant on you financing the machines?
Absolutely, yes. We actually went through a phase where we culled a whole lot of our clients that were saying that they're doing serious volumes of coffee and they weren't. And we decided to pull machinery out or withdraw supply. And most of the people that we decided to pull the machinery out for, most of them bought the machinery from us anyway. But as you say, it's a very capital intensive industry, because if we want to invest, looking for a new cafe to supply, we have to supply everything. Down to umbrellas, awnings. I've been asked to supply tables and chairs, and I haven't done that yet. But we have to supply espresso machine, grinders, cups, you name it. And anything with our brand on it needs to be supplied for free. Free on loan, we call it. And the prices are reflected to a certain extent, the prices that we charge, but not. We have to keep up. To keep up with the competition, we have to supply the machinery and supply the updated modern machinery that people are requiring today.
So the evolution of your business, is that like the evolution on your shirt, that you have to be Superman to be able to...
More than Superman, yeah, more than a superhero, just to keep up and to keep growing. The evolution is. I'm not flying yet. I'm flying to Origin to buy coffees, but not. The business hasn't reached superhero status yet. No.
So I think you love Ethiopia as a source country, right?
I was born, as I say, I was born in South Africa, so I've got African blood running through my veins, and for me, there's no better country, or there's no better feeling traveling back to the coffee motherland and sourcing some of the finest coffees in the world. So my favorite origin is Ethiopia. Our blends represent that as well, and that is my primary direct trade coffee that I buy.
And so what are your other sources of countries that you get coffees from?
I also source, you see, we take quite an Italian, a northern Italian approach to the way the way we're buying and the way we're roasting. So it's more of a lighter style coffee, but also using the industry standards that the Italians have been using, whereas using Brazil naturals or pulp naturals. And so that's another origin that I source from, El Salvador. But as I say, primarily my focus would be Brazil, Ethiopia, and some from India as well.
So these are three classical components for what could be a really phenomenal espresso blend, right?
Yes, correct, yeah.
Do you prefer in general for your drinks that you ultimately end up serving through your clients to use a multi-component blend? We
do, yes. That very much so. We probably have, the smallest blend we have is probably a two blend, the smallest blend that we have is a two bean blend, and we can go anything up to 5 or 6, 7 beans in the blend, even to a point where if we found that the sweet spot in the coffee is great at a certain time and a certain temperature, but you can go lighter and darker with the same coffee, we would put that again into the same blend if it worked.
And so your model demands a lot of focus and effort.
A lot of focus and
ability of sourcing. Right?
Ability of sourcing, but also my model relies a lot on the flexibility of what we have in front of us and what we can buy. And it's not that, we have a recipe that was handed down from generation to generation of a certain blend that works and you have to stick to this blend. That doesn't work. That's flexibility as a roaster is probably key in this industry.
So now you travel to Ethiopia. How do you recognize a good supplier or a good producer? What do you look for?
I'm still looking. No, I think we better cut that out. How do you? Look, I think over time it's more about a relationship and a friendship building than just a pure supply and client basis. It's about establishing relationships more than just buying coffee. That's probably more important than anything else, is the relationships and the trust. Because as we said, there are pitfalls in buying coffee. I mean, I've heard stories of people finding bricks in bags of coffee and as I say, buying a certain coffee, paying a certain price for a certain coffee, and then the coffee arrives and it's not anything close to what it is. Fortunately for me, that hasn't happened yet, and yes, I'm doing my best for that not to happen. And as you say, how do you establish? It's about establishing the relationship and the trust in origin.
And so, in your direct trade model, you've chosen a very challenging country.
Yes.
From a supply chain model, right?
Yes, and yes, it is. It is.
So what are some of the challenges then?
One of the challenges as a roaster is that it takes anywhere can take probably 2 weeks to 3 weeks for us to receive samples, and also we're so far away. I mean, it's if you have a look at the proximity of the US to Central and South America, it's kind of almost like a truck stop away. Whereas us, it can take 6-7 weeks for the coffee to arrive in Australia. And also, I mean, the other thing that we're concerned about is that most of the coffee gets transshipped in Singapore as well, which is very hot and humid and not the best conditions to be shipping coffee. So the pitfalls with that is that you need to make sure that the coffee gets shipped quickly, and also the other pitfall with Ethiopia is the coffee has to be paid either with a letter of credit or cash up front before they even ship the coffee.
So you have the problems receiving samples.
Yes.
The challenges for payments.
Yes.
Are there other challenges?
Yes.
Like what?
Well, just the logistics and trying to deal with the bureaucracy in Ethiopia, and just, I mean, we found out a couple of weeks ago that Ethiopian exporters now, there was a directive from the bank that they can't ship out more than 1.5 kilos of samples in one shipment, because they were scared that most of the coffee was being shipped out in samples, I guess. And then it was, but not only that, for 2 weeks, they weren't, until they could get permission from the bank to ship the samples, they weren't even allowed to ship samples out. So I was on the other end of the phone screaming and shouting, saying, "Where are my samples?" And it's like, well, we don't have the permit to ship your samples. But that's fortunately that's changed now a little bit, but it's hard, and as I say, it's challenging because sometimes it can take 2 or 3 weeks for samples to clear through quarantine, and by that time the coffee's already been sold. So again, relationships is very important, where you actually have to stress to your supplier that you need to be patient with me, because it's going to take longer than usual for us to approve on the samples. I mean, a sample arrives, we've roasted it, and by the next day the coffee's had been cupped and been approved or rejected.
So with all those challenges, why not just focusing your energy on another country? Why Ethiopia?
Because of the diversity in flavor and the complexity that Ethiopian coffees can bring, and I have a love for the motherland of coffee. So I enjoy a challenge as well. I guess it strengthens your mettle, the challenge, and also enhances creativity, because you need to be on your toes and on the ball.
So knowing that there can be these surprises with Ethiopia, so how do you, as a roaster, take the variability of quality into consideration when you do your roast profiles?
Well, we try and buy the best quality coffee that we can out of the country. We've moved now more away from the commercial grade 4s and grade 5s into specialty grade 1 coffees. And generally, again, if you have the support of your supplier who will send you the coffees that you're after, that makes it easier. But as you say, it's still a challenge. It's still the thing is though. But with Ethiopia, when you have coffees that are really good, they're going to be really good, and almost. I guess we buy the best coffees that we can, because when we're dealing with espresso, you have so many variables that it's very hard to keep a really good, consistent cup of coffee. So the better quality coffees we buy over time, we find become more forgiving to the I guess the nuances of the baristas or the machinery not running to the perfection that it should be, even though we're still maintaining that all the time.
So you don't agree with the saying that in a blend you can mask imperfections of coffee?
I don't believe so at all, because I think if you're doing that, especially through espresso, because with espresso you have the intensity, everything is being intensified, and flavors are intensified more through espresso. So if you put a crap coffee into a blend, it will come shining through as a crap coffee. so yeah, it's not about masking. It's about buying the best quality coffee, and it's not even about price. It's about determining the quality of the coffee and making that work for us on the upside.
So you're not a micro roaster. You're a small or medium-sized roaster. And so, what are the most important lessons you've learned from the supply chain, from the importing and supply chain part of your coffees? Looking back the last 20 years.
Relationships. I think it's direct trade, and it's about trust and forming partnerships with people around the world. So not even just, as I say, supplier-customer relationship. It's about partnership and working together with people to ensure that what we sample is what we get, and that's probably the. But also traveling. I mean, and you don't build a relationship without traveling to origin. I tend to go to Ethiopia at least 2 to 3 times a year just to keep up, if not even to find new suppliers, but just to keep up the relationship that I have with current suppliers.